Ruth has spent their entire season planning a very dangerous game. She is surrounded by people who can turn against her at any movement. The highest still believe he can control her. Obeda has already shown that he is willing to challenge the balance of power. And inside the Raku compound, almost everyone has their own secret agenda. But episode 8 may be where Ruth's biggest advantage become clear because the title of this episode is The Blood Still Works. And that title could mean much more than religion. It could be about loyalty, it could be about family, it could be about Ruth's pregnancy, and most importantly, it could be about the connection between Ruth and the heist. A connection that may become much more dangerous for everyone around them. So today we are breaking down everything we know about Ruthless Season 6 Episode 8. What the title could mean, Ruth's changing position inside the compound, the highest growing dependency on her, Obadiah's problem with Ruth, and what could happen next. Let's get into it. One of the most interesting things about Season 6 is that Ruth is no longer simply trying to survive. Earlier in the story, Ruth's main goal was straightforward. Protect herself, protect her daughter, and find a way out. But now things are much more complicated. Ruth has gained influence, and influence inside the Raku compound is extremely dangerous. The official Season 6 description says that the Ruth is challenging the highest control and, while pregnant with his child, claims to speak for the Raku. That changes everything. Because Ruth is no longer just another woman inside the compound, she is becoming someone whose decisions can affect the entire power structure. And that's exactly why people like Obadiah have a problem with her. The more the highest listen to Ruth, the less powerful the people around him become. And in a place like this, losing power can be more dangerous than losing your life. The title immediately stands out. The blood still works. At first, it sounds like a religion phrase, but Ruthless has always used religion and belief as part of the story power structure. The Raku compound uses fate to control people. The highest presents himself as a spiritual authority, and the people around him are expected to obey because they believe he has a special connection to something greater. But Season 6 has been slowly challenging that idea. Ruth is beginning to understand how that system works. And instead of simply fighting the system from the outside, she is learning how to manipulate it from within. That's why the word blood becomes interesting. Blood can represent family, blood can represent pregnancy, blood can represent loyalty, and blood can represent power. Ruth is now connected to the highest through a child. That connection could become one of the biggest weapons in the entire story. The relationship between Ruth and the highest is probably the most important relationship in Season 6. The highest has always believed that he controls everyone. But Ruth is different. She understands him. She knows what he wants to hear. She knows when to challenge him, and she knows when to make him believe that a decision was actually his idea. That's a very dangerous skill, because the high does not like being controlled. He likes controlling other people. And if he eventually realizes that Ruth has been influencing him, their relationship could change completely. But for now, Ruth appears to have something that very few people inside the compound possess: his trust. And that trust could be temporary. We also cannot ignore Obadiah. Earlier in Season 6, Obadiah's frustration with Ruth became obvious. The official episode's description have already established that Ruth's influence over the highest anger Obadiah. Then episode 3 showed Obadiah taking matter into his own hand to protect the compound. And episode 6 continued that tension with Obadiah, overstepped his authority and caused a shift inside the Raku compound. That tells us something important. Obadiah is not simply angry, he is fighting for his position. He sees Ruth as a threat to the structure he understands. The problem from Obadiah is that directly attacking Ruth could also mean challenging the heist. And that dangerous move. So Obadiah needs another strategy. He needs to make Ruth look dangerous. He needs another people to question her. Or he needs to create a situation where the heist himself start doubting her. And that could be where episode 8 become very interesting. Zane is another character we cannot ignore. Earlier in the season, Zane was desperately trying to keep herself under control while following Ruth's order in an attempt to gain her freedom. That is important because Ruth is not operating alone. She has people around her, but those people are also under stand pressure. Zane has her own survival instincts. And if Ruth's plan become too dangerous, Zane could eventually reach a breaking point. That's one of the biggest problems with Ruth's strategy. The more complicated the plan becomes, the more people need to stay loyal. And in the Raku compound, loyalty is never guaranteed. River is also moving through his own dangerous storyline. Earlier in episode 6, River was determined to save Peter after he was badly injured. Then the story shifted toward money, secret, and control. River demanding Jonah's half of the secret finance password was another sign that the story is expanding beyond the immediate Raku compound. This is important because Ruthless is not only about physical control anymore. This is financial power. There are secrets, there are outside connections, there are people trying to expose the Rakudushis, and there are people trying to protect themselves. That means the entire operation is becoming increasingly unstable. This is where I think season 6 is heading. Everyone knows something. Ruth knows something. The Heist knows something. Obeda knows something. River knows something. John has information. Desire has her own agenda. And outside forces are also getting involved. The more secret exists inside a group, the harder it becomes to control that group. Eventually someone talks, someone makes a mistake, someone gets scared, or someone decides that saving themselves is more important than protecting the others. And that could be the real meaning behind the title. The blood may not only refer to the Ruth pregnancy, it could represent the bond that keep these people together, and those bonds are being tested. Here is what makes Ruth so interesting. She does not need to physically defeat everyone. She needs to survive long enough to make the people around her turn against each other. Think about it, the Heist wants control, Obeda wants influence, River wants answer and leverage. John has secret, Zane wants freedom, Desire wants to expose the Rakudushi, and Ruth wants to get herself and her daughter out. These goals don't naturally fit together. That means conflict is inventable. Ruth only needs to understand where everyone stands. And if she can manipulate those relationships, she may be also able to create her own escape route. The pregnancy is one of the biggest developments surrounding Ruth. Because this is not simply about Ruth becoming pregnant, it potentially changed her position within the hierarchy. If the child is the highest, then Ruth has a connection that nobody else can easily ignore. And that gives her symbolic power. But it also creates a weakness. The more important the baby becomes to the highest, the more important Ruth becomes. But at the same time, the baby becomes another thing that Ruth must protect, and that makes her situation even more dangerous. If someone realizes how important that child is to her, they could use it against her. Now let's talk about the biggest prediction. Prediction 1. I don't think Ruth's power inside the compound is going away anytime soon. The official season 6 description especially says she is challenging the highest control and claiming to speak for the Raku. That sounds like a long-term storyline. So episode 8 could push Ruth even further into a leadership position. But the higher she rises, the bigger the target becomes. Prediction 2. Obadiah has already shown that he does not like Ruth's influence, and he has already crossed the line before, so I don't think he is finished. He may not attack Ruth directly. Instead, I expect him to look for a weakness. He could try to turn someone against her. He could question her loyalty. Or he could attempt to convince the highest that Ruth is manipulating him. If that happens, Ruth could suddenly lose the protection she has been building. Prediction 3. This is probably the biggest danger. Ruth has been very careful, but the highest is not stupid. He may be unpredictable, but he understands power. If he discovered that Ruth has been manipulating his decisions, their relationship could become explosive. And because Ruth is carrying his child, the consequences could be even bigger. Prediction 4. Ruth needs people she can trust. Zane may become one of those people, but Zane is already under enormous pressure. So I think we are going to see a moment where Zane has to choose between following Ruth's order and protecting herself. That choice could have major consequences. Prediction 5. Desire's storyline and the FBI relatable storyline suggest that the Raku operation is becoming harder to hide. If outside investigators get closer, while Ruth is simultaneously gaining power inside the compound, the story could reach a point where both sides collide, and that's when everything could explode. There is another interesting clue. Episode 9 is titled Tunnel Vision. Episode 10 is titled Fire and Desire. That suggests the story is moving toward increasingly intense conflict. Tunnel vision sound like characters become obsessed with one goal and failing to see the danger around them. And fire and desire sound even more explosive. So episode 8 may be the setup. It could establish the relationship and decision that eventually create the bigger conflict in episode 9 and 10. That's why I think we should look at episode 8 as an isolated episode. It could be the middle point of a much larger storyline. Without investing scenes that have not been officially released or reliable recap, the biggest thing to watch in episode 8 is who gains control, not who wins a fight, not who takes the loudest threat, but who controls the decision. If Ruth manages to influence the heist again, that's a victory for her. If Obadiah successfully challenged her influence, that's a victory for him. If Zane and another character break from Ruth's plan, there's a warning sign. And if outside forces get closer to exposing the compound, then Ruth's escape plan may have to change completely. The real battle in Ruthless is not simply good versus evil, it's control versus survival. And Ruth is becoming very good at planning the game. Season 6 has turned Ruth into a complete different kind of character. She is still trying to escape, she is still trying to protect her daughter, but now she is also trying to control the people who control everyone else. And that's what makes her situation so dangerous. The highest thing he is still in charge. Obadiah's think he can protect the old order. Other characters are making their own plans, but Ruth is quietly building influence. And the title, The Blood Still Works, may be pointing directly at the thing that gave Ruth her strongest connection to the heist, the child she is carrying. But remember, in Ruthless, every advantage comes with a price. The closer Ruth gets to power, the harder it may become to escape it. And if Obadiah finally decided that Ruth has become too dangerous, the entire balance inside the Raku compound could collapse. So episode 8 could be much more important than it looks. And if the upcoming Tunnel Vision and Fire and Desire titles are any indication, things are about to get much worse. What do you think? The Ruth actually controlling the heist? Or is the heist simply allowing Ruth to believe that she has power? And do you think Obadiah will eventually turn against her completely? Let me know your theory in the comment. And if you enjoy this breakdown, make sure you subscribe to Screen Chat with Azhar because we will covering the next episode as soon as it drops. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one.